I've talked about why game journalists, just gives like 7 out of 10s, 8 out of 10s. Occasionally, you'll see a 6 out of 10 just spring the fuck up out of nowhere, and I believe it's because of access journalism. It's if you give them okay to good reviews, you get early access copies of the game. You maybe even get wined and dined to test out the games. You get effectively whitelisted, whereas if you shit on the games, and this is for AAA games, you get blacklisted. They might not work with you. They might not give you your products. And things like this is far more valuable than just getting money up front for these because one, that's illegal. So, and two, again, the getting wined and dined is far more valuable because, and again, this is just how people act. Like if Angry Joe was wined and dined by the creators of Forspoken, he'd probably have a much softer opinion. Like this is just how human beings act, right? That's why it's just ethical journalism not to, you know, accept any of that if it's happening. But, not everybody acts that way. So, the truth about all 7 out of 10 games reviews. Let's give
I
some
can't believe
watch.
it's happened again. I'm sick of seeing it everywhere. It haunts me. It's in my nightmares. It's in all of my waking hours. It's everywhere. The number 7. Another games journalist has given another video game a 7 out of 10. And today I'm going to tell you why that's fairly common, actually, because there is, like, a pretty good reason for it. Or maybe not necessarily a good reason. I'm not trying to color this reason in any direction. It's just a reason that you see 7 out of 10s as being common, to the extent where we now sometimes refer to 7 as, like, an average. Which is weird, but allow me to explain. First, if you don't know me, sometimes people meme on me for mentioning this, but you'd be surprised the amount of people who comment on my videos who don't even know what my current job is and assume that I'm a full-time YouTuber, let alone a job I used to have, so that's why I sometimes say it. Turns out people don't know stuff. And I used to work at IGN. I was a writer there for 3 whole years, which makes me exceptionally qualified. The most professional, lauded source on the internet, educated to such a high degree. I started, and I feel
Yeah, I don't know anyone who works there. Well, they'll act like this, but I wouldn't put that on a resume if you're going for another job. My personal opinion.
that really sells it. The one person on the planet equipped to tell you that step 1 before we get into the rest of this video is some of y'all take game reviews way too seriously. I will explain why the 7 out of 10 is so common and why it's memed because it's so common and that it doesn't make sense. I feel like so many conversations about game reviews would be like so much more chill if you just remember that it's just some fucking guy's opinion. I used to be that fucking guy. It's just some fucking guy has an opinion on something. That's all a game review is. The fucking guy who writes the review is no more or less qualified to have an opinion on any other fucking guy on the street about a game. That is my genuine opinion. That is the opinion that I held when I did it and got paid for it. I personally do not consider game reviews to be journalism, even though they technically are by definition of the word. But again, it's just some fucking guy's opinion, man.
Yeah, but see, the problem, right, is say during Gamergate, that some fucking guy all of a sudden believed they were the effectively the cathedral of women, and they attacked gamers. They attacked the gaming as a hobby. They attacked the consumers, and that's what Gamergate was the consumer. It doesn't matter which political. It doesn't matter if you were left wing, right wing. Like the Tumblr right with the pronouns in the bio was standing hands in hand with the Redditor with the neo Nazi sign on his bald ass head and shitting on games journalists. Like the problem was when they were called out for being unethical, right? That some fucking guy who claimed they were the authority were being unethical, they attacked the consumer, right? And again, they refused to actually take like, and again, they represent IGN. They get paid to do this. You know how many gamers would love to get paid for playing games? And above this, they have their political opinions. This is across the board, right? That people don't care about. But yeah, they do impose this on you. And people do look towards them, a company that has ads for information. And if you give a game that probably sold 20 million copies, that has sold 20 million copies, an 8 out of 10, and a company with a game that barely had 200 people playing at max, a 7 out of 10. Yeah, people are going to be like, what the fuck? Like, look, you're putting yourself in a position where, yes, you are the authority on this, right? And this is why access journalism is a thing. And again, people people had a problem with them back then in 2016, and now people just meme. And I think even IGN is probably the best out of all of them, but that's not really saying much. But yeah, if you put yourself as the authority, people will treat you as such, even if you're a terrible fucking authority.
And they certainly are not objective and do not strive to be and shouldn't be, because they are opinion based. They are not reporting, they're just, not fucking guy has an opinion. And to be clear, before somebody gets upset with me, not being sexist here, women can also be some fucking guy. Like I said, I used to be some fucking guy. Gender neutral. It's really just that the guy who does it for IGN has an editorial policy that he has to abide by, probably has more writing experience than the average person, and more people will read it. But that is really the only difference. No one's opinion on a video game is any more or less valid than anybody else's. The only exception to that, and like I feel that way about films and stuff too, the only exception to that is when, in my opinion, someone who has a ton of expertise is the one reviewing something. Tarantino, not just some fucking guy. Miyazaki, Hideo Kojima, not just some fucking guy. They go beyond...
Yeah, they make games. They're in the industry. They are in the companies that made games that effectively made your childhood. But again, game journalists, they put that some fucking guy puts themselves in that position to be the authority. And when they do that, people treat them like such. So if they're a terrible fucking authority, people are going to shit on them, right? And this is because of Gamergate, right? When they were, a single game developer and a single game journalist outlet was getting shat on, all the game journalists, all the game outlets went against the consumer, went against gamers, saying gaming is dead, gamers are sexist, gamers are this, that, and the other. That is why we're at this point, and you can't blame the consumer because that's fucking retarded.
The sphere of some fucking guy in which all of the rest of us exist, but otherwise 100% of us, IGN, GameSpot, Kinda Funny, you in my comment section, we're all just some fucking guy. It's actually pretty crazy when you think about it. Like, really, the whole world is just run by just a guy. Like, what are any of us doing? Think about how many things you don't know how to do or how many mistakes that you've made, and you're still here, and that's just the same as the rest of us. None of us have any idea what's really going on. We're just some fucking guy who got a job. There it is.
Yeah, but see, when you start to moralize, you don't just become some fucking guy. You become that guy that everyone shits on and moves the fuck away from. Look, if you start moralizing and you end up being just the worst at what you do, yeah, people are gonna call you out for it. Like, this is just how human beings act. They act this way in school, they act this way in college, they act this way at the job, they act this way on the internet. Like, this isn't new, right? I'm not shitting on you in particular. This is just the perception people have of games journalism.
Okay, but first, 7 out of 10. Why is it so common? Why does it feel like 7 out of 10 has become the average video game score, at the very least in the AAA gaming space? Why is everything a 7 out of 10? Why is it so common? What happened to the other half of the scale? Why aren't we using it? In my opinion, it actually is because 7 out of 10 kind of has become average for AAA games, but maybe not for the reasons that most people would think. Important to note before we get into this that different websites do have different scales. A
Absolutely.
9 for IGN is not the same as a 9 for some other website. You have any feelings about reviews that you look up what their individual scales mean? One thing that I see people mistake all the time is that they think a 10 out of 10 is a perfect score or that it's a perfect game. For IGN, for example, a 10 does not mean perfect. It just means masterpiece, because no game is perfect except for Portal and maybe
Or Overlord. Right? Or 99 Nights, the first one. Yeah. Yeah. Or Forgive Me, Father, the first one. Yeah. Yeah.
also Deadly Premonition and Doom 93 and Tunic. But that's the list of perfect video games completed. Unless you have anything to add, editor of this video, Jacob Fullerton. The floor is yours.
Gungan Frontier. All your favorite characters are there. You
Oh
get to
my
play.
god, I forgot this game existed. Oh my I thought this game was like shovelware. Like, no, when I got this from the fucking library, I thought it was shovelware. Like, I thought this was just a memory that my brain just purposefully erased. This game was actually a thing. Because, like, I'd play any Star Wars game, like Galactic Battlegrounds, Star Wars, Empire at War, and the Force Corruption one, right? There's a Star Wars X-Wing game that I didn't really fucking understand, but I played it anyway. Yeah.
Play with Fombas and Falumpa sets and plant trees on the moon, and the UI is a clam. 10 out of 10, perfect game.
There we go, comprehensive list of perfect video games. No, really.
That game nearly gave me a fucking aneurysm when I played. I remember I played that game, and it almost made me stop playing Star Wars games. I'm like, so is this all the Star Wars games are going to be on the computer? Then I played with Galactic Battlegrounds and was like, we are so back, boys.
Like, none exist. 10 out of 10 means masterpiece, right? It is a masterpiece. It doesn't mean it's perfect. But for whatever website that you read reviews from or whatever discourse you're involved in, I recommend checking out their individual scales. And if you look at a 7 on the IGN scale, 7 means good. Not great, just good. When I worked there and I reviewed video games and movies and stuff sometimes, Dan Stapleton, the executive editor of reviews at IGN, told me to treat what score I would have if I was having trouble as what would I say if someone walked up to me on the street and asked. So a 7 would be, yeah, it's good. It's not great, it's good. It's good. Because, to be honest, assigning a score to however many thousand words you've written where you try to really explain every single nuance of this thing and why you do or don't like it is extremely difficult and sucky, but it's just really important to audiences. Like, it gets clearly so much engagement from these websites. People want the opinions distilled into a little number. It generates so much discourse. It generated this video, technically, and probably many videos about 7 out of 10 or 10 out of 10 game reviews that exist on this platform. Audiences clearly are very attached to the review score. For writers, it sucks. So when you're having trouble being like,
yeah, and people care about it nowadays because games are costing more money. So people want to know if their purchasing decision is worth it, because again, the loser that played games back in like 2006 and 7, or like in the early 1990s, is now grown up and now probably has a job and a family and has to work for a living. So they'd like to know if the review, if they know that game's gonna be a sound purchasing decision, and if the review reflects that. And there's been times where they've given bad games 7 out of 10, like games that were just objectively bad. Concord, for one, a game that the consumer just did not want. And I think this is my issue with games journalism, is they don't take the consumers into, they don't take them into consideration when making the reviews. They take some fucking guy, and again, if you put yourself in this authority, right, and they also moralize. They have to have the correct fucking opinion, and if they have ads on their site so many ads. It makes there's like they make money to have this done. They want to become this protected class. Like people are going to put you in such high regards, right? And it just comes with the territory, right?
I don't know what these words distill to. How am I going to figure that out? A good way to do it is, what would you say someone came up to you on the street? So a 7 is, it's good. It's not great. It's good. And firstly, that does encompass a lot.
Yeah, but again, people you come up to the and you talk about a game you like. Like I personally will like Black Myth Wukong. Like people will sing the praises of that game because it's forever for the next 10 years, right? And I'll be like, yeah, it sold millions of copies. I probably have like 100 and something, 200 hours in the game. It's a good game. Other people, 20 million people agree because it sold 20 million copies. Hell, it was probably one person bought 2 or 3 copies just for their friends, right? Like, word of mouth is a powerful thing. It's what sells products. But if you don't take any of that into consideration, yeah, people are going to be like, what the fuck are you on? Even if you are just some fucking guy, I mean, you're doing effectively the dream job, and you fucking moralize. Not you in particular, but IGN does. So, yeah, people are going to treat you as such.
A lot of video games, especially when you're a reviewer. People who review games or play games professionally are, by virtue of the thing that is their job, playing a lot more video games than most people. Now, before you get mad at me for that, it's just that they're allowed to do it during work hours. So they're playing more video games than every other human who has a job that is not in the games industry because they're allowed to play games at work. So, like, by default, they have more hours on any given day in which they can/are playing video games. But because the average games journalist is able to play more video games than the average reader, it's kind of another reason that a review is just some fucking guy's opinion. What somebody who has played 1,000 games thinks of a game is inherently going to be different to what somebody who's only played 100 games thinks of a game, because you are coming into that with that wealth of knowledge, experience, and those set your expectations. Like, you might find something bland or generic because you've played 10 other games like it. If someone has played less games than you, they may not feel that way. Imagine somebody playing Star Wars Outlaws as their very first Ubisoft game. I myself was like, I'm kind of burnt out of Star Wars, I'm kind of burnt out with the Ubisoft formula right now. This feels very samey, it's not grabbing me, so I tried, and I decided that I wasn't going to play any more of it. But someone who's never played a Ubisoft game before might be like, holy shit, this is crazy, what is this? We're all just a bunch of...
Yeah, but again, that goes back to my argument, right? Like, you have the job that most gamers would die for, and it would be so easy to just hire someone who plays games, so they would look at Star Wars Outlaws and be like, what is this goofy shit, right? Like, if you're just hiring someone who, again, they only really play because they are made to. And then there's that one video of someone playing Cuphead and they couldn't even get past the tutorial, right? Like, people, again, at your job, people expect you to be good at the job, right? Like, because they are getting paid to play. It is their job. And people expect a level of professionalism. People expect a certain level of objectivity. But, yeah, I mean, it's fine if it's their own opinion, right? But people also expect, them to take the considerations of the consumer. Like, take the consumer at heart, right? And you can't say, oh, well, Black Myth Wukong wasn't even out yet. How did they know? Look, the motherfucking benchmark tool sold, it was free, but 700,000 downloads for the fucking benchmark tool. Just so people can see what settings can the game run on for it to work, right? If a fucking benchmark tool sells over 500,000, the game's gonna be good. People are gonna buy the game. So again, this idea that, and you can see the hype online if you actually take the consumer into consideration, take the people that you intend to disseminate your information to. You need to take them into consideration, but see, that's the problem. They don't.
Guys who have just fucking opinions. It's all so subjective, and it's impossible not to be subjective. You're inherently bringing all of the experiences that you have had into every opinion that you form on pretty much everything. And that's
Yeah.
why reviews are what they are. They're just an opinion. Secondly, I think there's a misconception that 5 is supposed to mean average on the scales, where it doesn't, at least not on any of that I've ever seen. A 5 for IGN means mediocre. They describe it as something that is bland and unremarkable, and I guess with that definition, I wouldn't be like super uncomfortable personally categorizing Star Wars Outlaws that way, maybe. I haven't played enough that I feel confident saying that. But that becomes complicated when you realize how many games do fit below the 5 category, and that's kind of the point of this video. 5 is not actually baseline average, and it makes sense that most scores that these outlets give are going to be above a 5, because in comparison to the amount of video games that come out, the AAA games that people are playing, the games that are popular enough for people to even be talking about them, for somebody to need to write a review about them, are going to be in that upper category. Like, there are so many video games that come out. And the truth is, most games that release are very, 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 very flawed. Most games that come out don't even have an inch of the complexity that you see in something like Star Wars Outlaws. And you may take that with some kind of like offense, as though you think that Star Wars Outlaws is not complex. And that would be totally fair if you compare it to everything else that you've played. But if you compare it to the games that come out, it has incredibly complex systems. Most games aren't even close to that level of
I mean, if you take like the shovelware that comes out on Steam, I'll agree with you. But if you take and consider indie games, like some indie games aren't as complex like as Star Wars Outlaws, but are better anyway, right? Like there's a lot of indie games that are just not complex. They don't have any amount of complexity to them, but they're memorable and they're good, and I like them, and I get people will like them, and I understand that again. Another reason that I think they do 7 out of 10s is because they only review popular things. Like, there's no reason why they'll review an indie game that nobody knows about. They'll only review AAA games because above, the early access copies and maybe even the whining and dining, they still get the clicks and they still have just the basic bitch normie audience, right? I mean, if they wanted to step into something interesting, they would review indie games, right? But they're not going to do that.
complexity. Most games that release have one song, they have maybe 2 inputs, they have very few mechanics. They're just, you kind of press the same button over and over and over again. A lot of them crash all the time. They're very...
Yeah, like a game played with a friend named Ruza, right? It's not very complex, but we enjoy it, and it's coming out with a chapter 2, right? I mean, what complexity isn't really much of a benchmark. But again, if you are a multi-billion-dollar AAA gaming company and it costs $300 million to make that game, yeah, people will absolutely hold you on another playing field, like a different playing field than an indie game company. And yeah, it's unfair, which I don't think it's unfair, but yeah, you can say it's unfair. You can make that argument, but it's just the way it is. I mean, that's just how people view it.
buggy. Sometimes they don't even have music. Most games that come out do not have even like an inch of the complexity or nuance that you are used to in AAA video games. Bad UI, unintuitive controls, just all of the things that net them somewhere between 1 to 5 on a game review scale. That means that they kind of need the space for the 5 to 10 for the other games. We're basically at a point where hundreds, if not thousands, of games are released every single day, usually from one-person teams who do not do it full-time. You don't even hear about these games, but I'm going to do an experiment for you all right.
Yeah, but see, again, you don't play those games. I doubt they play those games. They're not shown. Like, you don't release a comprehensive list of shovelware games. Like, that'd be another interesting thing IGN would do, is just have a dedicated dude that just plays shovelware and plays, like, hell, maybe even abandonware somehow. The type of games that you technically can never find ever anymore because the companies just drop them like a sweat sack of potatoes, right? You know, that would be something interesting. But again, like you said, they don't play those games. So why would we take them into consideration if you don't play them? I mean,
Now, I'm going to boot up the 3 most recent releases on Steam and play them for you right now. I don't know what they are. This is not rehearsed. It's not going to be the games on the bestsellers list, just the most recent releases, new releases on Steam, and I will show you exactly what I'm talking about of like what majority of video games that release actually look like. Okay, everybody, I've downloaded the 3 most recent releases on Steam. They are Doll Catching Simulator, Future
Ooh.
Breach, Youngblood, which is free to play. So that's pretty cool. And Zool Dungeon. Let's start with Doll Catching Simulator. I need settings so I can... It immediately crashed. Tried to change the aspect ratio and it immediately crashed. This time it didn't even have a menu. Cat? Oh, AD key, switch the claw machine. Enter key select. Okay, here we go. Enter key inserts coins.
What in the
Enter.
fuck?
AD keys move. Space. This
Oh,
has
shit, they
physics,
got
which
the
is actually pretty cool. Enter.
I was about to say that.
Just like in real life, they've nailed it, to be honest. Pick it up, pick it up. We got a cat! Huge! Am I the world's first, what was it called? Doll catching simulator speedrunner? I might be. I feel like that's maybe it. I did get a couple of cats. Look at me go. I like this. This is cool.
Yeah, and again, this is probably just some project made in someone's college just to say they did it and just threw it on Steam and be like, oh, well, someone might buy it and you might have inexplicably made this person's day because, what, you actually bought the fucking game and now you're advertising it?
That is Doll Catching Simulator. It functions.
Ew. Ew. It's made in the Godot engine. Ew. Nasty.
To be honest, very simple. The art
Never mind, this is probably like some Chinese games.
is not great, but it works. 7 out of 10. Next, we have Zool Dungeon. I have no idea what this is. Trap? Zool, not enough. Unlock trap first. Okay, okay. Right click to spawn your monster. Click him. Spawn him. Click him. Spawn him. What's the timer for? Why am I being timed? The surviving hunter, 100 destroy hunter camps. I'm earning money, I think, maybe? Oh, this text. Increase base HP, PT on summon. Increase movement speed on... Oh, yeah, okay, I can wait. I can give him little buffs. That's cool. So now we got like a jacked up Hobu. Am I trying to kill these guys? Oh, okay, yeah. Okay, got it. I think this is... Maybe I just spawn these in to kill these dudes. Oh, did I lose? Well... That's Zool Dungeon.
Huge.
Compelling. Last but not least is Future Youngblood, a game that is apparently made with Unity. Game? Hello, this is a
Unity
preview
was
build to show the
you.
initial gameplay. Later versions will... Oh, okay, hang on. I can't do this one.
Now, granted, Unity is still kind of whatever, but
As it turns out, Future Breach Youngblood was just a demo, so I'm gonna go back to the Steam library, or the Steam store rather, and we will get deep in the dungeon. I need to reach floor 240 to escape from here. Okay, I like the music.
oh,
Not
that's
something
cool.
I could see myself playing for a super long time at this rate, but it's really just arrow keys, which means you can move through it pretty fast, and it's, you know what, it's pretty fun. It's not bad. You get the idea. Probably the top 10 looks like that kind of thing. Maybe even more than that. And websites like IGN have to effectively reserve the lower half of their scales for those games because those games exist. They just very rarely review them because most people don't know what they are. Like, if people aren't searching for them, people aren't really trying to figure out if they need to buy them or not, so you don't really need to write a review for them.
Yeah, they're clickbaiting. But again, people want to know games outside of AAA space like that. There is a market. But like that's what got me into PC gaming was playing games that were indie because the one PC I have couldn't play a single fucking AAA game if it tried. But yeah, I mean people want to know other things that are out there and if it's cheaper, like I mean there is value in that. But again, not you in particular, but IGN, like games journalists only review popular AAA games, right? And then that's the issue. Well, that and the moralization
but in case one goes viral, like The Day Before, for example. Very bad, basic video
Yeah,
game.
yeah.
They still need to have that bottom half of the scale there for
And
those
they
games.
reviewed
And when you
that game.
consider
Yeah, and they reviewed that game because it was getting hype. It was getting, people were talking about it, which is why they reviewed it. They reviewed it for the hype train.
how many games are like that, it starts to make a little more sense why you keep seeing AAA games on the other half of the scale. Like, that's the breadth of the scale that is being considered. AAA games are inherently a lot more complex than majority of the games that come out
That
every
doesn't
day,
make
so
them
they are
good.
far, far, far more deserving of the top 5 part of that scale. The scale is not just AAA. Does that make sense? Am I articulating this? I remember when...
I mean, I get what you're saying, but again, complexity doesn't make the game good, right? I mean, if it's like Concord, a game that was literally not meant for gamers, it was meant to suck up just government grants, ESG money, bait Sony into buying it. Like, okay, it's complex, sure, it was popular for like the week it was even out, but again, that doesn't make it a 7. Again, if you take, people playing, like how many people played into consideration, right? Like that game absolutely is not a 7. To me, it's a 0 out of 10 because it's not for gamers. It's not a game for gamers. That's not the point of the game existing.
Diablo 4 got massively review bombed by the user ratings maybe a month or so after it came out, which was deserved. They made some disappointing changes, but people were giving it like a 2 out of 10 and calling games journalists shills because they weren't giving it 2 out of 10. But when you see the games that I just showed you, and then you compare it to something like Diablo 4, which has complex systems and enemies and classes and a ton of progression and music and sound design and art, you can see why it doesn't really exist in the same realm as a lot of the 2s that come out every day. It was functional.
Yeah, but again, maybe the problems with the scale, like, if you have effectively maybe half of the scale that is just for games that you do not review at all, that does not account for them, then the scale's the problem, right? And again, if you fail to take people's the argument of the consumer into consideration when making these reviews, again, like, yeah, people are going, it's like, again, the scale is the issue, right? Because now you have people that are like, oh, you're buying them out, which is, again, illegal. I'm pretty sure the IGN is not just being bought out just to have these reviews, but I do believe there is an incentive to give them at least a 7 or an 8 out of 10, for games that, like Concord, that weren't even good games. Okay, they're complex, sure, they're multi-billion-dollar AAA games, sure, but it just wasn't a good game, and the proof of that is it getting shut the fuck down, right? I mean, like these 3 games you showed, when you played them, there was effectively more people playing these games than are playing Concord, right? So I mean,
and it had this cool feature where you could actually play it for more than 5 minutes without being extremely bored. Basically, Steam is full of a lot of things that like barely count as video games or what the general public understands a video game to be, and most of them aren't even really worth reviewing, but the scale has to still exist for them. And it's like, I get why if you've only played AAA games, or if you only played really, really popular games that do rise above, the schlock of majority of the stuff that comes out, that you would have a skewed perception of what the scale looks like. Like, your scale is probably different to the scale of some other fucking guy based on just what you've played, where reviewers often have played a lot of stuff that falls on the lower half of that scale and is the reason the lower half of that scale exists. I think you could pretty easily make a case that they should just not touch those lower half games at all, and that you could like have a scale just for AAA games and they could be 2 separate things. But I think that would also be pretty complicated to explain to audiences in a lot of cases, where I feel like it's probably easier to explain, no, a 0 or a 1 or a 2 is for games that don't function. Diablo 4 making changes that negatively impact the game didn't make it completely non-functional, or didn't make it so that the only thing you could do was like play a claw machine. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but again, if you make a scale that again, half of it is just flat out not accounted for or not discussed. It's just there to fester and die. And again, you don't even put out a list of games that sit in that scale. Again, the problem is the scale, right? The problem is, the metric being used, because it effectively there exists in the metric games that you will not review, right? And I think that's the problem.
But yeah, you could certainly argue for that if you wanted to. Go ahead. I'm just explaining why it currently exists the way that it does. And to be clear, I'm not trying to defend IGN in making this video in any capacity. Even when I worked there, they had game reviews come out that I staunchly disagreed with. When I worked there, they had the Doom 2016 review, which was written by a freelancer who gave it was like an insane low score. Yeah, it was 7.1 for Doom 2016. And I remember like everyone in the office being like, do not fucking agree with that at all. But it
Yeah, but they still hired him. They still paid him to do it, right? Like any gamer at the time would have probably given it a high score, right? People who play games probably would have given it a higher score, but I mean, yeah, but why have the majority of the scale be unused? Right? And again, they freelanced it to some rando to play it who probably doesn't even like games, or they could have freelanced it to someone who plays games.
was from Job Gilroy, who did not even work in the IGN office, a total freelancer. I don't think he even wrote for IGN very often, like maybe 1 or 2 times, I'm not actually sure. But like, they've certainly had review scores that I fundamentally disagreed with, and that's just sort of the reality of reviews being just written by some fucking guy.
Yeah, but it's one thing if the coworker disagrees with it. It's another thing if the consumers disagree with it. Again, IGN gets paid and gets advertiser money to sit as the authority figure, and those some fucking guys are getting paid a job to do this, but they don't take the consumer into consideration when making these things. Like, they don't really, and when they don't do that, yeah, you're going to have people that look at Black Myth Wukong with an 8 out of 10 and Conquer with a 7 out of 10 and be like, what the fuck? Right?
But yes, this is essentially why you might feel like you see so many review scores that are above a 5, or you feel like the lower half of the scale is being underutilized. It's why 7s feel like it might be average, and why I've heard people like call to change the 7 to a 5. But it's just when you factor in games that you probably haven't played or probably haven't heard of, the bottom of the scale gets very, very, very full very fast, and your AAA games start to look a whole lot better in comparison. And finally, I know that this isn't going to sway anybody who, like, already feels some way about this, but just to establish it, no publisher is giving an IGN reviewer a bunch of money to influence a review score. There are ways that companies try to manipulate positive review scores in ways that I think are extremely egregious and actually far worse than I think the general public realizes. Like, this stuff.
Yeah, they bought views, they, not bought as in with money, but they have like AI or like these AI generated accounts, put goofy ass reviews on them. They might not pay off the people in particular, but again, they wine and dine them. They give AAA companies high scores just as the incentive, so the game companies can keep giving them products in the future for early access. I mean, there is reasons, and then when this happens, the consumer, which again, IGN places themselves as the authority figure to, like, the consumer isn't the incentive. It's not, the incentive isn't to give the right information, it's to give the correct information, right? Or that doesn't make any sense. It's not to give information that, benefits the consumer. It's to give information that benefits the product, the company.
Stuff is huge. I'm gonna make a whole separate video about this. I was gonna put it in this video, but then it's like too many topics in one video. It's a lot. I will make a separate video about basically like publishers, companies trying to influence people to get positive reviews and the manipulative tactics that are used for that. There is so much to say and so much to unpack. But where just handing somebody money to give a game a score, which,
Yeah,
by
that's
the way,
legal.
as an aside,
I
I've
know
seen people
that.
recently suggest that IGN was paid to give Star Wars Outlaws the 7 out of 10. Why would Ubisoft pay for a 7? A 7? If you're paying a reviewer, you couldn't just slip them, like, you know, a company like Ubisoft with a shit ton of money, just like another 50 grand or whatever the fuck, and be like, just make it a 10. Why would they pay for a 7? But handing somebody money to give any review
Yeah,
score is
sounds
extremely illegal. And these companies have giant legal teams who are so hardcore and so intense about this kind of stuff. Their whole job is to prevent the company from getting sued or getting fined. That is the job of these legal departments. I've worked with some of these legal departments. They are annoyingly hardcore. Stupid legal rules where they try to avoid getting sued for the dumbest shit. You're like, nobody's gonna sue you for that. And they're like, doesn't matter. Somebody could, so don't do it. Paying somebody.
Yeah, but their job also is to find legal loopholes, right? And this is something people don't really understand about legal teams. Like, yeah, they are to cover your ass, but they're also to find loopholes around the system. Like, again, the whining and the dining of reviewers is one thing. You know, the access journalism is another thing, right? And again, it's IGN's incentive to get the product before the consumer so they can put that information out there before it, like any other YouTuber and anybody else.
To have positive sentiment, even if you disclose it, is illegal. Did you know that?
Yeah,
So, like,
it's
if I
still illegal,
do
doesn't
a
matter.
sponsored ad here on YouTube, they cannot ask me to say something that I don't believe. They are not allowed to ever say, hey, can you say this sentence? I think I've received pushback on that maybe once.
But the implication is still there, right? They don't have to straight up tell you. But again, this is why it's ethical. At the end of the day, it really just depends on the person. Because, you know, yeah, if you're getting wined and dined, you will feel a certain obligation to give it, to maybe give it a softer review than if you weren't. I mean, it's just human nature, right? It's in your interest because I worked in your interest. I mean, this isn't anything new, right? Like, we all know that friend that, you know, will side against you if, you know, with another friend, because that other friend apparently, I guess, maybe gives them more benefits, or maybe hangs out with them more, or maybe like any other, like, this is how human beings act. And you can hate that, or you can understand the fucking meta, right?
Once where they were like, can you say that? And I was like, I don't feel that way.
Yeah.
And they had to be like, okay, they are not allowed to do that. That is very, very, very illegal and taken very, very seriously. So paying for positive sentiment without disclosure is going to get you fined, but even with disclosure, also going to get you fined. Like, extremely illegal, again, taken very seriously. And asking games journalists specifically to lie about review scores, I think, is one of the dumbest things that a company could possibly do.
Yeah,
Like, that's going to come out so fast if it were actually happening. It's an industry full of people who are so poorly paid and are often very bored with the stuff
I
they're able
agree
to
with
write
that.
from an industry that gives them, like, no information about anything and is constantly withholding things and just making them, like, rehash press releases because the games industry is so cagey about information. Frankly, they are desperate a lot of the time to write the article that gets their name out there or gets views or makes people like them.
Yeah, they're desperate to get the views. They're desperate to keep the interest of the company. They're desperate to get wine and dine. Yeah, I agree that they're underpaid, right? But you're still working a fairly easier job in comparison with most other people, right? Like, you're not the construction worker. You know, you're not the garbage disposal guy, and it's so cheesy to add that descript, like to add, you know, the distinct. The, it's easy to have that argument with, oh, your job not as hard as the other, but I mean, it's something you think about. You're like, wow, me sitting here on my YouTube channel, me with my job, is like, wow, I really do just have it better than the other guy. Now, I'm not ashamed of that. In fact, God damn it, I'm glad. But yeah, that's also something you gotta think about. Even if you're get underpaid, like again, I don't really know what uh, metric is being used there. I mean, again, you're just playing games, and again, there are gamers that would absolutely, would have that job. Like they'd absolutely take your job in a heartbeat. People who play games, like playing games as a job, people do that shit in a fucking heartbeat. And not you in particular, but like any IGN journalist, right? Any Kotaku journalist, like someone who actually plays games would absolutely take their job if they can sustain themselves. Absolutely.
It gives them the prestige of breaking this huge conspiracy news story. Like, so many, I would say 90% of people who work in that games media industry would be frothing, chomping at the bit at the opportunity to leak this story.
Oh,
if it were
yeah.
happening, it would have leaked 1,000 times over. And I actually don't doubt that it was happening in the 90s and 2000s before a lot of the more strict regulations came in. Of course, companies are going to try to do it. They just can't anymore. And publishers do have other ways of trying to influence review scores, like I said. I'll have a whole separate video about that. But they are
Yeah.
not giving game reviewers money to give games a 10 out of 10. Again, just like think about everything you've ever disagreed with somebody on. Think about the dumbest fucking thing that you've seen on the internet that you disagreed with somebody on. Your toilet paper. You put it over or under. Heated disagreements about that stuff. Over is correct, by the way. Anyone who puts it under, I will literally, in your house, if I see that you have the toilet paper under, I will change it in your house. I don't care.
I don't even put the damn thing on the roll, to be honest. I've gotten to that point where I just put it in my hand, roll it myself, and throw it back into, I don't know, the fucking sink where I've had it. I'll never fucking put it on the roller thing.
You and some fucking guy are gonna have different opinions.
Yeah.
It's boring, but it's true. And as an aside, on my own aside, I promise you, if I ever find any evidence or any even suggestion that game reviewers are being paid off, I will tell you in a heartbeat. I would get so many subscribers. People would be so happy with me. I would get so many views, so much credibility. She finally outed it. Wow, look at this person go. That's my ethics. Instead, I'm doing my routinely dumb bitch move of telling you the truth that I know most of you probably don't want to hear. Not most of you.
No, it's like, we know there's other ways and other incentives than getting paid. I mean, I know that there's other incentives outside of just flat money, and that's what people are talking about when we're talking about access journalism. It is in IGN's interest to, even if it's just a 7, which, and for most people would be meh. I mean, it is in their interest to not get blacklisted from the company, so they're going to give it a softer review, right? And again, it is also in their interest not to take the consumers what they say into consideration, right? Like, let's think about every situation where IGN, Kotaku, like all these game journalists had hand in hand the same fucking opinion on a game, right? So you had, let's really think about this. You had Black Myth Wukong and the sexism happening in their company, the supposed sexism in their company in the game, right? That's one case where every single game journalist across the board had the same fucking opinion, and almost within like 30 minutes to an hour release something on it, right? What's another one? Oh yeah, the Wizard game. How can I? The Harry Potter, the Hogwarts Legacy, and J.K. Rowling's and being a TERF, trans exclusionary radical feminist. But again, within 30 minutes, 45 minutes, an hour, just article at one after the other, and they effectively copied each other's homework. Stellar Blade, right? Again, and the skimpily. Oh yeah, there's the hard R thing where there's like a wall that had graffiti on it, and one font a different color. It was hard, and in a very small red goofy font it was R. Like they were looking for things to attack that game and that company for. And again, within 30 minutes, 45 minutes, an hour, they're just article after article after article talking about that one specific fucking thing, right? And there's others, but see that's the point I'm trying to get across. They act like this ideological like other game, like one game journalist company and the other one should be at odds. Like they should be competing for the best information. But no, they all have the same opinion. They all give around the same reviews to AAA games, and they all again moralize to the consumer. And I think this is the problem that people have. Like once you start moralizing, you open that can of worms as a company, right? Like you're not an individual, you're a company whose incentive is to make money. Once you start moralizing to your consumers, that's a can of worms that can never really be put back in. And that's what people are talking. That's the issue, right? And the access journalism, that's just the symptom. The 7 out of 10s for every AAA gaming game from a AAA company, that's the symptom. The problem is the moralization. The problem is them not taking the consumer into consideration. They take their own ideological backing into consideration when they attack good games. Again, these are popular good games that people enjoy, that consumer enjoyed, right? And then you have games like Star Wars Outlaws and Concord that are just garbage, and they get 7 out of 10s also. And in those cases, they don't take the consumer in consideration. And if it's just one fucking guy, again, you should have a system where, okay, you shut the hell up about politics, you only talk about the game. Like, they should censor themselves, right? But they don't. They don't do that. And that's what people have a problem with.
It's just the ones who don't want to hear it really don't want to hear it and are definitely going to get mad at me in the comment sections of this video. Like, I'm aware of that. In fact, I will probably lose subscribers for this video. I actively reject the proven to be excellent strategy of saying the thing the masses would like to hear and make the controversial video that will force people to yell at me. All of that to say, it would be a lot easier for me, or as someone who actually does work in media, to come out and say reviewers are being paid off. If it were happening, they would have done it by now a million times over already. I would have done it by now a million times over already. I don't review games that don't accept codes. I have no reason to lie to you about this. It's just not happening. It's just some fucking guy. There are also just a bunch of factors where it comes to some fucking guy's opinion, where the person who reviews the game is the most likely to be excited about that game because they put their name down on the sheet where they said they wanted to review it, so they are likely to be more interested in it. Basically, some fucking guy is probably into the thing that he signed up to play however many hours of and write a review of. That's why he signed up to play it. And my suggestion for people looking for game reviews that they align with is actually to just find an individual or a couple of individuals, a reviewer, like one writer or one YouTuber who you really align with and actively seek out their opinions. I don't even feel like it makes sense to read every IGN game review when IGN is just 20 different some fucking guys who have vastly different opinions from one another even, and frequently disagree on review scores even as employees of the same company. Like I said, while I worked there, there were review scores that were given out that I really did not agree with, but there's nothing you can really do about that because I'm not the some fucking guy who reviewed that particular thing. What I do personally is just ask my friends. I don't read reviews at all. Literally never. They mean nothing to me whatsoever.
Yeah, word of mouth is far more powerful than games journalism, absolutely. But again, IGN puts themselves in a position where they are part of the industry. They are a cog in the machine, which is the gaming industry, and they want to be viewed this way as the arbiter of information. The problem is when they give piss poor fucking information, right? And people shit on them. Like, yeah, people are going to, because this is the position you put yourself into, right? I mean,
and I even felt
like I 100% agree that we found out that they were paying people off, right? That you jump on it, right? But people know that there's other incentives that are actively happening in front of your fucking face, in front of the consumer's fucking face, And this is why they shit on games journalists and shit on IGN and Kotaku, right?
Felt this way when I worked in that space. I just asked friends what they think of something and what they like about it and what they didn't like
Yeah, I
about
do
it, and
sometimes.
based on what I know about that friend and what they said they liked or they didn't like, I can make an assessment on whether I will or will not like something. Basically, 7 out of 10 is the average because the scale accounts for the amount of games that do not have even half the complexity of most of the games that you play, and does need to have the lower half of that scale in case one of those games gets reviewed. Again, I'm not trying to defend that.
Yeah, but again, then the problem is the scale, right? Let's go all actually go through
Just trying to explain it for anyone who might be interested or like has never thought about it before and was, if this video makes anyone go, oh, yeah, that makes sense, then great. And remember, game reviews are just the opinion of some fucking guy.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense, but my argument is okay, well, then maybe the scale is the problem. Like, if the scale accounts for games that you'll never review and you'll never play, and again, like you said, aren't as complex, so you don't bother. I mean, again, then you should change the scale. You literally talk around the issue. Games are so bad, that's why the scale is off. But IGN never gives a 0 out of 10. Wouldn't that fix the problem? Or are they just protecting their access? Yeah, this is what I'm saying. I mean, I don't think she's talking around the issue. I think she's pinpointing a particular issue that may be like a third or maybe less than a fourth of the consumers have. And it's good information, but the problem is, like, we know what other, outside of them getting paid off, we know there's other forms of incentives. She pretty much dodged the entire reason why 7 out of 10s happen and tries to defend Star Wars Outlaws. Again, I don't think she's defending. I think she was just giving her take on the situation. And it's 100%, it's not, I mean, I guess the word, I guess 100% valid, but I mean, again, she's talking about a less than a fourth of what people are talking about. Why does everybody always forget about price? Unlike reviewers, we need to pay money for our games, so it should be absolutely part of the review. Triple A games cost $70 and aren't comparable to most less complex games. They want them to be compared to other AAA games, not some 10-day IT student project for $1. Yeah, again, the score, that's the problem. Like, the table accounts for things that you're never going to review. We're never going to see a video on. So, and again, price is absolute. Like, price for the game is absolutely a consideration, right? Like, we live in an age where people work for a living. Like, you have to work for a living. So yeah, people are going to look at the price, and if they see a $20 game that's better and has less complexity, but it just has more people playing than a $70 game, yeah, the game reviewer should take that into consideration. The video is actually infuriating to watch. A bunch of platitudes, excuses, and nonstop weasel language. You'd still fit in with an IGN ecosystem perfectly, never improved. 7 out of 10. Again, being harsh on her won't fix the problem. I mean,
From what I know about
I
that,
don't believe she's at fault. Again, she tried to put light. That she puts light to an issue, to grievances that some people had. The UI is a clam is the best way to tell if a game is good. Remember when Jeff Gerstmann was fired from GameSpot because he gave Kane and Lynch a low score? The publisher had paid GameSpot large amounts of advertising and expected to get a good review, and when they didn't get one, they pressured GameSpot to sack him. Oh yeah, I didn't know it was Jeff Gerstmann. I don't think they were. See, now I'm gonna have to look into this, but god damn it, I'm doing Oh yeah, and they should also take into consideration if a certain PC type of PC specs can even run the fucking game, right? Because I get most $70 AAA game or poorly fucking optimized. They take 3, 4, 500 gigs to make. Again, maybe that's something they should take into consideration because at the end of the day, they are giving information to a consumer. That's their business, right? I don't know if that's what this says, but I heard the 74%. I was the guy tink in the brain. It's like, yeah, what if you don't have the right specs? Maybe that's something you should put into consideration. Remember, PC Gamer gave Gollum 46%, and Space Marine 2 was 60%. The time to review the reviewers. Yeah, again, yeah. Access journalism is the reason why every game gets 7 out of 10. Bad score equals no review copies, no leaks, no exclusive sources, no access to events. Some games are safe to get a low score, but most AAA games are unironically too powerful, and risk of giving a low score is too high and not worth it. Yeah, and again, this is the incentive for the people who are underpaid, right? The underpaid game reviewers to stick with the company, right? Because again, they don't want to get sacked like this guy says. They don't want the company to suffer. Like, yeah, I mean, 9% politics also don't play some measure. Yeah, politics also does. CEO Saber Interactive, who makes Space Marine 2, make comments about developing games to be fun instead of pushing an agenda on players. He didn't mention that what agenda it is, though it is implied that, and then PC Gamer magically giving Space Marine 2 a lower score than the Gollum game. Yeah, I mean, again, this is just a single point, right? But multiple points on a graph makes a line eventually. Like, you don't need a lot of points for people to see this, right? Sounds like that was going to be part of the second video. We'll love to see AJ and someone. But I don't think he does collab. I don't know what the fuck you're talking about. One of my favorite games. I've been 7 out of 10 soft. Now those games is something for everyone. I got more of a shot being everything for someone. Yeah. But anyway, again, this is a fine video. Yeah, sure, I'll subscribe. Right, just like, I mean, I like the video, and again, she brought like a, an issue, just not the issue in my opinion. But anyway, that's all I gotta say. Peace.